Final week, Friday, night. Trials before Annas and Caiaphas. It was against the law of Moses to hold a trial at night. Yet the soldiers led Jesus immediately to the house of Annas, the father-in-law of the high priest, who had been high priest before the Romans took over, where the lawyers, scribes, and elders were gathered together. Annas questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus said, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have taught openly in the synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have not spoken in secret, so why do you ask me? Ask those who heard me. These people here know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officers struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "That's no way to answer the high priest." Jesus said, "If I spoke evil, describe the evil, but if I spoke well, why hit me?" Then Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas, the high priest who was actually in office at the time. Earlier, Caiaphas had prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. John 11, verses 49 through 51. This was so that the entire Jewish nation would not perish, and that the Gentiles would also be gathered together with them as one. Peter and John followed from a distance. John was known by the high priest and entered in with Jesus, but Peter was stopped at the door. John went back and spoke to the girl who kept the door and brought Peter in. "Are you one of his disciples?" the girl asked Peter. "Not me," said Peter. "I don't know him." In the courtyard of the high priest, the servants and officers made a fire of coals, for it was cold. They stood around warming themselves, and Peter joined them. A young woman saw him and said, "This is one of them." They said to Peter, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" Peter said, "I do not know what you're talking about." The rooster crowed. The chief priests and the Sanhedrin, which was the high court of the land, looked for witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, but they couldn't find any who could agree with each other. Some stood up and said, "I heard him say he would destroy the temple with his own hands, and in 3 days build another without hands." But even these witnesses could not agree with one another. So the high priest stood up and demanded that he answer his accusers, but Jesus stayed silent and would not answer him. Then the high priest said, "Are you the Christ, the Son of God?"
Jesus said, "I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven."
The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any further witnesses? You've heard the blasphemy. He calls himself God when he is not. What do you think?" They all condemned Jesus to death. Then the men guarding Jesus spit on him. They covered his face, then hit him, saying, "Prophesy, who hit you?" An hour after his second denial, Peter was still in the court, now on the porch. After a little while, those standing around him said, "You are from Galilee. You are one of them." This time Peter began to curse and to swear, "I do not know the man of whom you speak." Immediately the rooster crowed again, and this time Jesus turned and looked directly at Peter. Peter remembered how Jesus had said that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. At daybreak, the chief priests, elders, scribes, and whole council gathered together to plot how they could put Jesus to death. They led in Jesus and asked him, "Are you the Christ?"
Jesus said, "If I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of God."
And they said, "He has condemned himself." Under Roman law, the Jews could judge a man, but not carry out an execution. Therefore they bound Jesus and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor over Judea. When Judas, who had betrayed Jesus, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was filled with sadness over what he had done. He returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "That doesn't concern us. You see to it." So Judas threw the silver into the temple sanctuary and went away and hanged himself. The chief priests took the silver and said, "It is unlawful for us to put blood money into the treasury." So they decided among themselves to buy the potter's field for a burial place for strangers. Therefore the field is called Akeldama, meaning the field of blood. This fulfilled the prophecy of Zechariah, chapter 11, verses 12 and 13.